Originally a 1986 novel and stimulant-induced hallucination, Stephen King's It is a story that follows 6 kids, a ginger, and the average politician sitting in the sewers, trying to put a bunch of little boys in his mouth. And with it being a 1986 Stephen King stimulant-induced hallucination, the novel delves into far more detail than any on-screen adaptation ever could, like a certain slightly suspicious scene that people who aren't allowed within 100 feet of schools and parks justify, and because this is a video about the on-screen versions, due to the simple fact that I can't read. And speaking of people who aren't allowed near schools and can't read, I have a Patreon page that you can sign up to if you want to see uncensored versions of videos. The first adaptation of Chris Hansen's least favourite novel was originally a 1990 made-for-TV series that asks the important question, what if we traumatize kids, but for fun and profit? Thinking that a television version of the book would simply never happen, King would go on to say that he had his doubts about it due to television's strict rules for not showing children in jeopardy and orgies. But nonetheless, questionable scenes aside, in 1990 an adaptation of it would reach our screens in the form of extreme child traumatization, masquerading as a 2-part miniseries, later edited together as a movie. Directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, a horror legend who's worked with some random dude named John Carpenter, who must have been a woodworker or something. Originally the series was projected to run for 8 to 10 episodes, but didn't on account of no one involved being able to count that high. And early development of the series would see George Romero coming on board to direct, with him seeming to show a lot of enthusiasm for the project, as one would at the prospect of getting paid to kill little kids on camera, but ultimately the deal ended up falling through, like little Georgie through a storm drain, due to scheduling conflicts with his 1990 remake of The Night of the Living Dead, where he ultimately didn't, on account of not. But eventually, the dream of having the series run from 8 to 10 episodes, much like the average Victorian child, would fucking die, with 2 more episodes starting to sound a lot more reasonable to the higher-ups when they took into consideration that it would cost a lot of money, and they just rather not. Beginning in 1990, in the fictional town of Derry, a town that shows up in a number of King's novels, it begins with a little girl riding her bicycle without a helmet and paying the ultimate price for it, being consumed by Tim Curry. Tim being perfectly cast for the role, due to him being British and them not having to waste money on prosthetic teeth. We then find out that there's now either 6 kids missing or dead, and much like Chinese health and safety standards, there isn't any, as none of the adults seem to care. The police aren't taking the incident seriously, as it's perfectly normal for a child to tear their own arm off, as that's just a side effect of going through puberty. The police might not be taking it seriously, but a man named Mike is, and after finding a picture of a little boy named Georgie, and generally being a fan of pictures of little boys, he takes it for himself. Mike, a librarian, then proceeds to call up all of his childhood friends, because all of the adults hate him. The lucky 7, Bill, Ben, Eddie, Beverly, Richie, Stanley and Mike. Bill, the older brother of Georgie, who back in 1960 went missing after playing with a paper boat from his older brother and having a rather unfortunate run-in with the neighborhood sewer man. He tells little Georgie that his name is Pennywise the Dancing Clown, a clown who does a surprising lack of actual dancing because that shit's embarrassing. And apparently to Georgie, this somehow isn't the most terrifying thing he's ever seen. According to a documentary involving the original creators, Pennywise's design was created in such a way whereas he would appear friendly looking and inviting towards the kids, leading me to believe that whoever designed him had never been a kid. After offering Georgie his boat back like the friendly good Samaritan that he is, he reaches out and murders him, because kids are annoying. Stephen King had stated that he came up with the idea of having something terrifying reaching out of the sewers for a forbidden tickle after psyching himself out one night while walking across a bridge and thinking back to the Free Billy Goat's Gruff story and imagining what it would be like if some terrifying creature reached out from below and dragged you away. But instead of a goat-eating troll, we have a children-eating Tim Curry. And much like a children-eating Tim Curry often finding himself standing around in various bodies of water, so do fish. Just don't eat the sewer fish, unless you're really brave. With the mobile game Fishing Clash being the sponsor of today's video. Fishing Clash does not support nor condone the fishing of small children out of your local sewer system, with fishing in real life being something I seem to struggle with due to my inability to shut up literally ever. So Fishing Clash allows me to experience the thrill of it, as the digital fish don't seem to mind all that much, that I'm currently sitting around in my boxers singing the worst rendition of Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles, whereas I usually get strange and confused looks from passerbys for a reason that I can't understand. Not only am I able to sit back and enjoy some relaxing fishing, but if I wanted to, I could tap into the competitive nature of it by taking on the daily events, facing off against various clans, engaging in the PvP aspects of the game, or working my way up the global leaderboard to be the top fish man. And when you're not in the mood to be showing off your skills and equipment against other players, why not fish in one of the many locations that the game has to offer? Build up your own fishing village, explore the different variety of fish that are in the game, or spend some time upgrading all of your equipment. Because with all of the customization options and all of the things to be done, this game has got a lot of content to offer. So if you're interested in trying out Fishing Clash today, why not click the link at the top of the description, or scan the QR code on screen to access the game, while getting these great in-game items using the code BIGWILL to get your $20 worth of rewards. Like all good friends, the Lucky 7 are drawn to each other due to their mutual characteristic of being fucking weird. But instead of sitting in a Discord server and sharing not safe for work artwork of TV shows that they're definitely too old to be watching, they break the cycle of stigma by going outside and touching grass. But they all have the shared experience of being relentlessly bullied and ridiculed by society for things deemed unacceptable, like having asthma, being ginger, being slightly overweight, and not being white. How dare they? They all have separate run-ins with Pennywise, with Ben finally seeing his father come back from the store with cigarettes and milk, which serves as somewhat of a surprise to him, because he's dead. He then sees Pennywise there instead, as he's actually Ben's father, as his mother's got a clown fetish, otherwise known as mental illness. Beverly hears voices coming from the sink, because the little children she keeps down there started making noises again, before suddenly a balloon comes out and pops, covering the entire room with a coating of blood, serving as a visual representation of her starting to become a woman and having her first period, except not really because I made that up. After being caught skipping the showers after gym class, Eddie's sent back by the coach because he really wants to watch, when suddenly all of the showers turn on by themselves and start protruding out of the walls. Pennywise appears out of the drain, as apparently he'd never miss an opportunity to watch a young boy shower, before trying to invite him down to his house, like that one memory from my childhood that I've subconsciously blocked out. And once Pennywise is done perving on little boys in the shower, Pennywise pervs on little boys in the basement, as he takes on the appearance of a furry. Richie's sent into the school basement to retrieve a mop after his teacher retrieved his lunch all over his shirt. And instead of receiving the beating he deserves like the ginger he is, he finds a rather funny looking mop in the form of Pennywise, as he's able to turn into his victim's biggest fear, and apparently Richie's is being yiffed. And much like a tiger roaming the average Indian village, he's going to eat the children. Children eating in the basement aside, he attempts to grab them in the woods as they look through an old history book of the town, because books are for losers. A book that depicts Pennywise from as early as the 1700s, showing up roughly every 27 years like a bad case of herpes, and causing complete and utter chaos in the town. Realizing that literally everyone else can't be bothered to do anything about it, they vow to kill the creature, because kids love killing creatures. Using 2 silver earrings, they plan on defeating it with the power of ugly, because those things are even more hideous than me. They head down into the sewers to confront Tim Curry in his favorite hangout spot, where they're followed by a bully Henry and 2 of his friends to conduct an ambush. And by conduct an ambush, I mean one of them is defeated by the Vietnamese approach of jumping out of the floor and killing them. Stanley's pulled aside by Henry, who's got a real big crush on him, and plans to show him his true feelings by stabbing him to death. But before he's able to do so, Pennywise appears in the form of an epileptic seizure to slowly squeeze one of his friends through a small pipe, before turning Henry into a Scandinavian. All of the children then see a strange looking spaceship or something, because sure, why not? When suddenly Pennywise appears and tries to take a bite out of Stan, before Eddie melts half of his face off with an inhaler, because he wants first dibs. The one and only shot in the entire movie where Tim wore prosthetics, because believe it or not, that's just what British people look like without a tan. Beverly hits him in the head with a piece of silver, before he does this cool ass flip and pieces out down the drain pipe. Just like my pet goldfish, that one time I wanted to see what would happen. And with Pennywise gone, Bill, never wanting to miss an opportunity to brutally kill something, makes them all promise that if the creature ever comes back to Derry, then they'll all return to kill it. And return to kill it they do, except Stanley, who gets a little bit confused and accidentally kills himself. 27 years later, and every member of the Losers Club has grown up and left Derry, except for Mike, who is indeed still a loser. Looping back to the beginning of the story, several disappearances and murders of children have occurred, and Prince Andrew isn't in town. After being called by Mike, Stanley's wife makes this face, and he makes this face, and everyone else agrees to come back to Derry and deal with the reappearance. And despite having very little memory of what took place all of those years ago, they all have the strange and overwhelming urge to beat this strange white dude up. Bill and Mike meet each other again for the first time in almost 30 years, and it looks like they're about to kiss, because remember, it's not gay if it's your homie. Richie arrives back in town and is overcome with the sheer and overwhelming desire to read a book. but is unfortunately interrupted due to some psychopath covering the entire room with blood that apparently only Richie can see, as he seems to have not taken his medication. Ben sees this friendly-looking fellow waving at him from the side of the road, and Eddie's fondled by his old pharmacist, just like the old days. Beverly returns to her childhood home to be told by the current occupant that unfortunately her father passed away, and nobody bothered to tell Beverly about it because they don't care. Your dead dad is your problem. She's invited in for a cup of tea to reminisce about the old days of being horrifically beaten when she realizes that she's accidentally been handed the blood cup. I hate it when that happens. After throwing it to the floor because she hates the elderly, Beverly notices that the old woman has now transformed into the decaying corpse of her father, which is almost as bad as her just staying as an old woman. After getting chased out of the house and looking back to see Pennywise, she realizes that the entire house is completely boarded up and derelict. They all decide to meet up at the Chinese restaurant, the appropriate response to finding out an ancient demonic, possibly otherworldly entity has returned and is snacking on kids, while you snack on fried rice. Beverly faints at the sight of a bunch of middle-aged men, because apparently women can't handle their own emotions. After waking up and proceeding to immediately kiss a married man for some reason, they eventually begin to talk about Pennywise, despite most of them trying their very best to hope that the conversation never occurs. Despite them all coming to this very location to make this conversation occur. They talk about Henry and how the Scandinavian was charged with the deaths of all of the children, which honestly isn't surprising considering he dedicated all of his free time to literally trying to kill children. He's being kept in a psychiatric hospital, aka the fun ones, and he begins to see Pennywise again too. That or either his dosage is off. But either way, he's been told that he needs to head back to Derry to finish the job that he started. The questionable contents of this succulent Chinese meal then spring to life, as they often tend to do, with blood being sprayed from the fortune cookies, as well as eyeballs, clawed creatures, and a bird fetus for a bit of extra protein. A scene that was supposedly shot in one take, with the actors genuinely not knowing what was going to happen in order for their reactions to be as believable as possible, because they just don't understand foreign cultures. After fleeing back to the library to use the power of books to defend themselves against a slightly aggressive fortune cookie, they learn about the death of Stanley, before very quickly seeing the death of Stanley as they open up Mike's fridge for a few beers, because apparently this man is a raging alcoholic who drinks while dealing with the incredibly stressful job of organizing books. They open it to see Stanley's head inside, with Mike swearing that it wasn't there before, or maybe it was. He was drunk, so who knows. And after Pennywise surprises them all with some booze and head, suddenly it begins to rain inside, before managing to make it stop through the power of friendship. That'll show you, stupid rain. After being given a knife by his old dead friend, Pennywise manages to help Henry escape by killing the guard with the dangers of slow motion. Bill's wife arrives in Derry after someone posted a TikTok of him and Beverly kissing, where she almost immediately has a run-in with Pennywise and his really cute shiny eyes. Deciding that bullying really isn't cool, they proceed to murder their bully for fun, while Ben proceeds to make out with a clown, because he's just kinda weird like that. Unfortunately, Mike took one to the guts in the process, and not in the fun way, and while visiting him in the hospital, he gives the group the silver earrings that they used to defeat Pennywise all of those years ago, after he went back down there to retrieve them during Pennywise's 27-year-long hibernation. Realizing that the only way out of this is to end it, they re-enter Pennywise's hole, and Bill immediately finds his wife's purse before forgetting how to run. After coming across a tiny door for the little sewer people, out of nowhere, Eddie proceeds to tell everyone that he's a virgin, hoping that the script holds true to the original book, and they can all just kind of fix that for him real quick, because he's just kind of greedy like that. A scene that originally had no intention of ever being in the final version until right before they shot it, where they decided that it would add more gravity to the situation. It's not the gravity that was holding him down, it was his full balls. After entering the sewer people's door, they find bodies wrapped in spider webs, including Bill's wife, who seems to have forgotten how to blink. After being disturbed by the sight of a woman, the viewers, as well as the friends, are disturbed by the sight of Pennywise's true form. A spider with an 8-pack, a decision that most people involved with the movie, including Tim Curry himself and the director Tommy Lee Wallace, disagreed with. Not because they thought that his 8-pack was promoting unrealistic body standards, but because a movie that was so prominently featuring Tim Curry as Pennywise no longer featured Tim Curry as Pennywise. It then lifts up its trench coat to mesmerize everyone and picks up Eddie. After killing him for being a virgin, Beverly fires one of the silver earrings into its rather peculiar lit up flesh pocket, causing it to retreat in pain at the sight of ugly jewelry. They then flip over with ease this ancient extraterrestrial otherworldly being that's been consuming humans for centuries and tear out its heart because who really needs one of them anyway? The movie then comes to its end with the bodies descending and Bill's wife cosplaying as a part-time vegetable until he manages to do what no doctor ever could and wakes her up by riding her down a hill really fast. That's how I fix all my wives. Disregarding the parts where all of those children die, the funniest thing about the existence of this adaptation is that it ran on TV, making it far easier for children to randomly stumble across it, to be horrifically terrified by the sight of Tim Curry in their dreams for the rest of their lives. I too see Tim Curry when I close my eyes at night. That and John Wayne Gacy being thrust into the public consciousness just over a decade earlier did a lot to help perpetuate the idea of clowns not being something harmless and fun, but something that likes to shove little boys under their floorboards. It would be 8 long years until the world would be graced with another on-screen adaptation of Pennywise, but this time it wouldn't be the case of a demonic, extraterrestrial, slightly hungry Tim Curry, it would be something far, far worse. An Indian. Because the thing is about India, it exists, and if your intellectual property does too, then they're gonna use it. Whoa, translated to it from Hindi to English, is a 52-episode long Indian horror television show written by 2 guys who had never read the original novel because it was simply too long. And honestly, as someone who's been turned down because mine's too long, I can respect that. All 52 episodes are available to watch for free on YouTube, with the one small caveat being that they're entirely in Hindi and I'm too stupid to understand it. And considering that this video is not sponsored by Duolingo, I'm going to stay not understanding it. But from what I can tell, it more or less follows the same premise of 7 kids vowing to defeat an evil clown creature, and by follows the same premise, I mean they turned Pennywise into a dwarf who kills himself and has now come back to enact his revenge on the non-vertically challenged. And for the life of me, I failed to understand how a 52-episode long adaptation of a book that the writers couldn't be bothered to read didn't catch on, when its grand finale culminates with our small king beaming up into space, and his mother telling him that she isn't ashamed of his height, because I too would kill people if I was a short Indian. And after that, it would be almost 20 years until the next on-screen adaptation, where our small Indian friend would grow up to become a tall Swedish person. With development of a theatrical film going back as far as 2009, I guess they just couldn't really be bothered for a bit. Until eventually they were, and after being passed to multiple directors, eventually it would fall into the hands of Andy Muschietti, who's previously written and directed a horror movie called Mama, a movie about your mum, which would very much seem to have been the right move, as 2017's It would go on to beat The Exorcist's 44-year-long streak and become the highest-grossing horror movie of all time, because people love to watch horrible things happen to children. Don't you? And with almost 30 years passing since the release of Tim Curry's rendition, all of the scared little kids would have grown up to be scared little adults, as the world would collectively come to agree that mass traumatization of children wasn't an adequate way to entertain them. So with that being said, with the original rendition of Pennywise being created in such a way that was supposedly meant to appear unassuming and inviting, leaving me to think that we have very different definitions of the terms unassuming and inviting, the cat was out of the bag. Or should I say, the kid was under the storm drain. People decided to grow up and stop pretending that clowns aren't anything other than pure evil, leaving there being no point at all in attempting to hide that. This rendition of Pennywise, portrayed by Bill Skarsgård, falls far more in line with the original idea that special effects makeup artist Bart Mixon had for the 1990 version, with exaggerated facial features and a forehead so cracked that a blind person could read Braille off it. With it being lucky that Bill Skarsgård is Swedish, because he just kinda looks like that. Beginning in the exact same way as the 1990 version, except not really because it takes place in the 80s instead of the 60s, Georgie proceeds to lose his paper boat down a storm drain, when suddenly Pennywise appears from the sewer below to tell him they all float down here, in reference to the many poos he's currently standing in. And with Bill Skarsgård's natural talent to consume small children, he reaches out and bites off Georgie's arm, in a scene far more graphic than anything portrayed in the original release, with him then making like the average Minecraft YouTuber and grabbing the child. A scene, while different, shares far more in common with the original than one might think, due to there being a scene shot for the 1990 version that involved Georgie being found dead on the side of the road with a missing arm, and being brought back to his mother, unable to do their secret handshake. We're introduced to the Losers Club once more, Mike working on a farm killing livestock for fun, Bill, Richie, Stanley and Eddie being intimidated by Henry in the corridors because he has a big crush on them, Beverly getting to test out the latest release of this new perfume, and the new kid Ben forgetting about the basic concept of gravity. Mike proceeds to have an encounter with Pennywise behind the butchers, with hands emerging from a burning building, desperately asking for the moisturizer. Stanley then has the most terrifying experience of his life by meeting a female, and Ben encounters a smoldering headless body running towards him, before seeing a Swedish person. The kids all proceed to become great friends after engaging in the tried and true pastime of committing crimes, as Mike's racially abused for daring to be born a different skin color, and Ben's physically abused for daring to be fat. So after Beverly distracts the pharmacist, the friends are able to steal medical supplies to treat Ben, before we see one of Henry's friends being lured into the sewers, because you'll never know what fun things you'll find down there. Eddie's terrorized by a decaying leper coming for a big sloppy kiss, representing his fear of sickness and risk, while Beverly hears voices coming from the sink, representing that she's crazy. After the bathroom is forcefully redecorated, Bill finds Georgie in his basement, leaving him upset and confused, as all of his parents' inheritance was supposed to go to him. After Beverly shows the boys her new blood room, all of them apart from Richie confide in each other that they've all been seeing things. And not just the things their creepy uncle shows them. Ben is the one who does all of the research and explaining on account of being a nerd, and realizing that the creature that they've all been seeing comes out to feast every 27 years, and it prefers its meals, how Reddit mods prefer their relationships. Young. Using a map of all of the incidents, he pinpoints where it must be coming from, and they realize that it's an old abandoned house with a well in the basement. And after being jump scared by the average Swedish person as he climbs out of the projector, they head to the house to try and put a stop to the creature. The leper explains physics to Eddie, and Richie's locked in a room full of clown statues, with one of them resembling Tim Curry's 1990 version if he was a really small person. Eddie then watches Pennywise emerge from a fridge looking like a pretzel if it had bones, before Beverly stabs him in the head because there simply can't be more than one ginger in a room at a time. The kids leave after it descends into the well with its cool new piercing, and we see Henry kill his own father because screw you dad, you can't tell me what to do. Not wanting to miss out on the fun, Beverly kills her dad too, before being taken away by Pennywise for out-gingering him. Bill finds a note that Pennywise conveniently left for him, so gathers up the group so they can go simp over a girl. Henry, now doing Pennywise's bidding, follows the kids as they descend down an incredibly hygienic well that's adjacent to an open sewer system, and attacks Mike, who's still at the top. And after he's sent down to cool off, the others find Beverly as she's using her womanly powers to float in the air, before Pennywise does the Gangnam Style dance or something, and tries to defeat her with the power of epilepsy. Stanley gets to have his first kiss, and Ben, rather creepily, manages to wake an unconscious Beverly up by having his first kiss too. Bill ends up coming across an armless Georgie as he's trying to scam the government for disability benefits, but immediately shoots that little shit in the head with Mike's bolt gun because he wants to keep all of his toys. Pennywise begins switching between the group's biggest fears for maximum entertainment value, before Beverly, back at it with the metal rod, shoves it down his throat, causing him to descend further into the sewers as he runs away from a bunch of kids. And much like the Tommy Lee Wallace 1990 adaptation, they all swear that if the creature isn't dead, then they'll come back to make it dead. But in a scene that isn't in the original version but was meant to be, they all make a blood pact together, which was changed in the 1990 release because everybody was scared of Cootie's older brother, AIDS. 2 years would pass in real life, and somehow 27 years would pass in Derry because someone doesn't understand math. And the next movie would start with a couple being the victim of a homophobic attack by a guy who really wanted to touch another dude. And after one of them is thrown off the bridge, Pennywise extends a helping hand before taking a bite out of him because gay people taste better. Mike finds out about Pennywise's return and decides that it's time to call up the old gang to horrifically assault a children's entertainer. Bill, a writer struggling to write the ending for the director Peter Bogdanovich, Eddie with an overbearing wife just like his overbearing mother as he clearly needs therapy, Richie, a stand-up comedian so probably a molester with a podcast, Ben, an architect who somehow managed to use his skills to create an archway to an alternate dimension as he works with Ben from the miniseries, Stanley, who takes his own life in an understandable decision after being asked to return to rural America, and Beverly, a ginger, with two of the adult characters actually being portrayed by the child actor's first choice, with Sophia Lillis choosing Jessica Chastain and Finn Wolfhard choosing Bill Hader, where the other guys unfortunately didn't get their picks because screw those guys. With Jessica seeming to be almost perfect for the role on account of actually killing an ancient demonic clown in real life, as well as previously working with Andy Muschietti on his directorial debut Mama. Henry, looking a little less like he'd pillaged the Christians this time around, is being kept in a psych ward after committing psychotic actions such as murder, but interestingly only for his father and not all of the other kids that he was blamed for back in the 1990 rendition. All of the friends meet for some Chinese, as apparently the people of Derry have some kind of sick tradition involving eating the Asians. But they suddenly decide to fight back as a humanoid baby creature emerges from one of the fortune cookies as someone really needs to call the health inspector. After finding out about Stanley's death, because they all just kind of forgot about his existence. We see that Pennywise has absolutely no table manners as he dribbles all over the place before taking a bite out of this girl's head. Over the years of conducting research into the creature, Mike discovered that a Native American tribe previously used an ancient ritual to capture the creature inside of an artifact that he's now in possession of, because much like the Americans that came before him, he saw something that didn't belong to him and took it anyway, with no one seeming to question that if they managed to capture the creature, then how come it is currently very much not captured? The creature being an ancient otherworldly being that slumbered beneath the surface of the earth for millions of years, patiently waiting the arrival of mankind. And when they finally arrived and the town of Derry was created above his original landing spot, he decided to eat the children because they taste best, something that he's been able to get away with since the settlers arrived due to his presence manipulating the adults' brains, like the average League of Legends player, in the private messages of a minor. That or they just really hate their kids. Mike explains that in order for the ritual to be complete, they must retrieve a personal artifact from their childhood and burn it. Beverly heads to her childhood home to learn about the death of her father, conveniently forgetting about her speedrun to become an orphan, before being invited in and destroying this old woman's home, because screw old people. She finds an old poem written by Ben, before she's sprinted at by a giant naked zombie lady with breasts sagging bigger than my future. Rich is called gay by Pennywise like the average 12-year-old in a Call of Duty lobby, and Bill finds his old bike in a pawn shop owned by Stephen King, who sells it back to him for an audacious $300, because cocaine is expensive. After Bill finds out that a young boy now lives in the house he grew up in, we then see Ben reliving a memory from school where he was running away from a girl, because girls are scary. Eddie relives a memory of his own, where he was lured into the pharmacy basement, where he was forced to watch the leper tongue his mother, before seeing that he likes to keep it in the family, as he comes back for him as an adult. Henry breaks out of the psychiatric hospital with this little easy trick called murder, before forcefully deciding that it's time for Eddie to enter his emo phase, as he pierces his cheek. Something that Eddie kindly repays him for by poking around in his guts, but not in the fun way. Punctured organs being merely a suggestion to Henry, attacks Mike before Richie decides to test out this cool new axe on the back of his head. After heading back to the original house and down into the well, they enter a cave to find where Pennywise originally landed, and performing the ritual, they summon Pennywise in his true form. Except not really, as it never worked for the Native Americans back then, and it isn't going to work for the non-Native Americans now. The spider from the 1990 adaptation makes a return, but actually good this time, and they manage to fix the problem that Tommy Lee Wallace had with the cave being too bright by giving you a fucking seizure. Pennywise levitates Richie, just like he did with Beverly all of those years ago by being a gross mouth breather, before it impales Eddie after he throws a metal spear into his mouth. At least this Eddie got some sort of penetration before he died. With Pennywise being injured and weak, they managed to defeat this all-powerful, world-consuming evil creature by simply calling it mean words. And after they're speaking to it, as if they are one of those kids from Xbox whose parents don't love them enough, they pull out its heart and crush it, just like my ex-wife did to me. The person locked in my basement aside, that would mark the end of Pennywise and his multiple adaptations, except not really, because money. Heading back to its roots as a TV show, 2024 will see the release of the Welcome to Derry series that sees Andy Muschietti come back to direct the first episode of the 1960s-based prequel, with it not seeing a return of Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, because they're racist against the Swedish. As of now, there's not too much to be said about the series, as much like my IQ, the information around it is currently extremely limited. But nevertheless, if it involves the horrific consumption of terrified children for our viewing pleasure, count me in. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to support the channel, despite YouTube making it incredibly obvious that they're not exactly fond of the type of content I make. If you yourself are interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron, not only are you just generally being a great support to the channel, but you get access to a few little perks like the private Discord server, where you then get links to uncensored versions of all videos going forward. So starting off with this week's new YouTube member signups, a massive thank you to Doomslayer66, Amelana, Econut C, Josephine F, Jen Warren Gray, Rojinoni, Otago Chan, Travis Pribliski, Drakenblut04, Loki Doki Doki, Zani Murno, Keegan Neely, Dave, Cartnor, Dennis, Daniel Combs, Cake, Daniel B, Nathaniel Murphy, Jefferson Norup, Meow QC, Emil Nielsen, Danny Woods, Gualberto Carrion, A7Hori7Y, Batgirl727, Caleb Herbert, Macho, Jenna, Brian Dubber, Jenna Lee Franco, Fabrico Rua Sanchez, and Fundy25. Now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Simeon Gonad, Kenny, Daniel Nunali, Doomsday Adams, Whitner MC, Connor Hornsby, Michael M, Gooseneck, Ruckus, Josh Wilford, Ollie James, Caesar Vicario, Cartoon Logic, Wildnar, Jacob Chadwick, Jerry Lee, Andrew Davenport, Reaganomics Lamborghini, Tommy Boy, Ben Fellas, Jared Gibbs, Kyle Evans from Walsall, Rainbow Bullet, Astral Helix, Lemon Tarts, Michael Navarro, Triple Flim Flam 101, Uriah Carter, Road Weary, Renzo Menzo, Wojciech, Jennifer Doon, Rule Govella, Kelly NG Bonalfalco, and Anti Moistlow. And once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching. And once again, thanks to Fishing Clash for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to use code BIGWILL for $20 worth of rewards.